Welcome to the Food Professor Podcast, Season 4, Episode 8. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm the Food Professor, Sylvain Charlebois.
Sylvain, we are live here together in person in Toronto at the Coffee Association of Canada's annual conference here at the beautiful Globe and Mail Conference Centre.
It's just a beautiful center. And I'm looking at you right now. I know people can't see you, but I look at you, and in the background, I see Toronto's skyline, yeah, with the CN Tower, the banks, everything. You look majestic.
Well, I was setting up the podcast studio here, a little pop-up studio, and I was reflecting. I took a picture last year, and I have to take a picture this year. The skyline keeps changing so dramatically.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's why we're always stuck behind cement trucks, I guess, on the highway getting in and out of this city.
Well, you turn around, there's a 42-floor building, and you think, that wasn't there yesterday.
Yeah, what the heck happened there? So we're chitting and chatting with a lot of interesting people today. We got, you're on the stage a little bit later.
Yep.
What kind of knowledge, what are you going to be talking about?
I'll be talking about a lot of different stuff, mostly about forecasting what we see in the future, about food prices. Inflation obviously is a big issue, and we'll be talking about the consumer, how the consumer has reacted to food inflation.
Now, is this your last speaking gig before the release of your food price report?
No, I have 4 more.
You have 4?
Yeah.
4 more.
I'm in Vancouver next week, Red Deer, Calgary, Montreal, and then the food price report.
Now you start to drop hints around, the report's done, right? I mean, it's in print.
I honestly reviewed it for the last draft this morning.
All right.
So it's written. Now, of course, it has to be shared with, we're 26 co-authors.
Wow.
So I wrote it, but
4 universities, right?
Yeah. So it's being shared as of today. And when you deal with academics, it always gets
peer-reviewed, so to speak. Peer-reviewed.
Sort of. And it always gets interesting because a lot of people have different point of views about things like the carbon tax. And I'll be talking about the carbon tax today because everyone's talking about the carbon tax. And I'll try to talk about things people aren't hearing right now, basically, because there's lots of noise about a lot of different issues. And I'll talk about AI, how AI can actually change the coffee industry over time. For example, when you go to a coffee shop, Michael, when you grab your coffee, what are some of the things that actually annoys you with a passion? There's a couple of things that annoys me when I go to a coffee shop and I grab my cup of coffee. There's always something wrong. Sometimes
the lid doesn't fit, but I don't know. I don't know. I'm not terribly annoyed. What are you annoyed about?
It's the heat.
Oh.
The heat. Sometimes they put too much coffee. I can't put milk in there. These little things. Of course, over time, we kind of get used to it. But what if AI gave the information to the coffee shop to give me the exact right temperature that I want for that coffee I adore? So AI can do that. AI can predict what people will want to be served when they go into a coffee shop. I think AI actually is going to make experiences better for the future in coffee shops, I think, or with coffee in general. But it's human nature to get used to things that annoys you. You kind of live with it. Like, for example, flying with Air Canada. Did I say that out loud?
Sorry.
But, when you fly at Canada...
We're talking about Air Canada, actually, a little bit later in the show. We're talking about their en route magazine.
Yeah, so anyways, it's just... you got to accept that when you go through Pearson, it's going to be a bit of a mess. And that's how it is. But with AI, I think people's expectations are slowly going to change due to ChatGPT. AI is being democratized right now in the market.
Well, I told you the story when I was in Orlando, in Florida. The Del Taco has AI runs their drive-thrus. You're not speaking to a live person. It's machine vision. They see you.
Yeah, you told me that.
And it never forgets to upsell. It's a brilliant product. Then it learns the temperature's hot, it's selling anyway. Yeah. So I think, it's a broader theme that you and I have been talking about is... but
it's intelligent upselling. It's not super size me selling.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's learning, or else it's just an algorithm that's an if-then.
Super size me is kind of 1980s.
Yeah. So
upselling with AI is like, you just ordered this. Maybe you want that.
Or everybody else is ordering this today.
Yeah.
You might like this.
Exactly.
Yeah. Very, very good. So our guest on this show, which is one of the first of several interviews that we're going to do here live, is Lisa Richardson, Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at Canterbury Coffee. Really interesting. She's on the CEO panel. a really interesting business because they're food service mostly. They do some private label. They do a little bit of direct to consumer, and it's got a great origin story. She's a veteran, so that's a great interview. We're going to be having that. Well, let's tap into the news. So first of all, let's talk about the research out of the lab about restaurants.
Yes.
So I read through the report. It's already been out a little bit it's already released. We'll put a link in the show notes. I mean, some predictable outcomes. People freaked about high prices. I mean, the restaurants are experiencing the same.
You weren't shocked by the results?
I wasn't shocked by the results. I was shocked with, not shocked, but I think the most concerning thing is that less than 30% are satisfied with their experience overall based on the money spent.
That's right.
Because I think everybody in Canada knows it costs more to buy food, right?
Yep.
But when they put the two things together, they got to expect that the restaurant bills are going to go up, but less than 29% are actually satisfied with the value they're getting. I think that's really troubling for the industry.
It is troubling, and for a couple of reasons, I think. So, for one, we're kind of training a cohort of consumers to be dissatisfied, and if you do that too often, they're not going to show up again. And so that's one thing. The other thing is that I actually think, like on one side, we have a lot of franchises here today with us. We have McDonald's, Starbucks, Tim Hortons. They're all here. I mean, I'm not worried about them. If you look at their balance sheets, they're fine. I mean, they have financial. Their structure is really sound. It's the independents that worries me. I mean, they're the ones really suffering. If they're not even owning where the locale where they're located, that's even worse. Their rents have gone up, and so financial pressures.
Or the traffic has gone down. If you happen to have a coffee,
most of them are downtown.
Right. If you happen to have a coffee location pre-COVID in an office building, you had a nice steady traffic. Now that's in jeopardy. You know what I was thinking about the report? I mean, the restaurant industry, and we're going to have the president of Restaurants Canada on in a couple of weeks. So it'll be another good conversation. The restaurant industry is when we think about it, the spectrum is so vast.
That's right.
Right from,
pubs, coffee shops,
fast food to pubs to bespoke
casual
pubs,
dining.
all the way up to very bespoke dining
Fine
experiences,
dining,
right? And I remember you and I were having dinner and at a place, and it wasn't really a place to be on a budget, and we were talking to
I didn't care. You paid.
Well, we were talking to the bartender. We were sitting in the bar, and he says, this one's a little on the expensive side. I said, well, we wouldn't be here if we were worried about whether it's $5 more or less. So I think there's some elasticity when I looked at your report that I'd love to go deeper into, like. Am I, when I go to a fast food place, am I dissatisfied more with that than I am when I go to a mid-market place or a high-end? I think the high-ends, that's a special occasion. It's going to be more expensive. And I also wondered, and I'd love to get into this later, is how tipping and tipflation factored into all this. Because you and I talked about that during COVID is, listen, on the one hand, putting tips into the bill will make it substantially larger. But I don't know. My experience is, when they hand you that thing and it says 25% means good and 30% means great. I'm like, wow, man, I remember 10%, 15%.
The wow is now 40%, not 20.
Do you think that's factoring into people's I think that's factoring into people's dissatisfaction with the experience, right?
Of course.
I think that's a huge miss.
I think
the industry,
so. Yeah, and I think so. There was this post-COVID era when people were patient, wanted to support their restaurants as much as possible, but now things are tight financially for a lot of people, especially millennials.
And what did Restaurants Canada report said? 50% are barely making it. 51% are barely making it. Now, in any good year, for context, like a third of restaurants fail. Like it is a high failure.
1 out of 5 succeed in 5 years.
Right. So it is a high turn business. Too many people get into it.
Yep.
Right. Anyway, lots of stuff to talk about restaurants.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, the question I've been getting a lot in the last couple of days is, do we have too many restaurants?
Well, I think the short answer is yes.
That's right. Well, my response to that question is that I don't think we have the right infrastructure given the market we have now, but that's always the case. I mean, you're looking at a very resilient sector. The food service industry is resilient. It will adapt. So, yes, restaurants will continue to close. And that's okay.
They always have.
And that's okay. And we'll see more restaurants open. I do think that the last 3 years, there's been some mega changes in terms of the marketplace, people working from home, You're seeing, a low employment rate, but also you're seeing inflation really hitting a lot of people hard. So they're more careful about how money. I mean, retail. We've talked about this. Retail grocers are selling less food. I mean, that's so. Of course, in service, you're going to see the same kind of shock. And I'll be talking about this morning. I mean, I know some companies in there are seeing certain numbers that may be troubling, but it's the same in retail. I mean, it's just a massive shift that we're experiencing right now.
Let's move on. So last episode, I sometimes have fun with the titles. Beef with the Bank.
Beef with the Bank.
Was
yes.
Episode title.
Yeah.
I think I surprise you with some of those sometimes. Was there any outcome from that? I saw some more discussion around it. There's a lot of feedback back and forth. Do you have anything to add at this point based on that discussion? I mean, it's kind of been said and it's done. And you were telling me off mic you're going back to Parliament but not about that specifically.
Yeah, a few weeks ago was FINA, and it was very much about the Bank of Canada. Yeah. But now it's going to be international affairs, so it's going to be about trades and things like that. So it's going to be different. But when it comes with the bank itself, what really bothers me is that they throw out these numbers without any context or any data. And the one thing that I've disputed on X this week was this 0.6 again.
That's what got me. That's right. I knew you're talking about something, but it felt familiar to me at the same time.
Yeah. So back in 2000, from 2006 to 2008, in 18 months, we saw the GST drop by 2%. And in those days, the Bank of Canada was saying that it would have an impact on inflation. We are expecting inflation to drop as a result of a lower GST rate. It never happened. It never happened, which is why I know a lot of people are saying, the carbon tax is costing consumers money. Maybe, but for the bank to say that overnight we'll see a one-time drop of 0.6 percentage point on the inflation for 1 year, I don't know how they come up with this particular assumption, because I think this is my business head thinking. As soon as you actually drop a tax, I don't think that prices will drop anytime soon. If you got the market to sustain the prices that you have, it will continue. And of course, the Bank of Canada analysis on the carbon tax only looks at 3 components of the CPI. GST affects most of it. So that's why I'm very skeptical. And I actually did ask questions. I actually sent out 9 questions to the Bank of Canada more than a week ago. I haven't received a response
Well,
yet.
Shout out to I'm sure they're listening. Shout out to the governor and his people. Come on the podcast and let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Let's have a fulsome discussion about it.
By the way, yesterday I ran into Stephen Paulos.
And he just won Business Book of the Year.
He was walking out of the studio at BNN, I was walking in. So we kind of agreed, because I've actually met him once before, and so we chatted, congratulated him on his award.
He was a guest of mine on The Voice of Retail.
Oh, okay.
Back when he put that book.
Great guy. Yeah. Doesn't miss the job. Yikes.
And now he's an award-winning author. So.
Yeah, no, he's great. And it's not, I do want to say this. The Bank of Canada doesn't have an easy job. The government doesn't have an easy job. I'm just doing my job as an academic. What I'm trying to do is make sure that the public is well informed. That's all I'm trying to do here. I do have a lot of respect for the institution and policymakers as well. That's why when they invited me to Ottawa to testify, I try to make myself as available as possible.
Let's just hang on government for a bit. Bill C-234 has been going through the process, and that bill, as I understand, has some exemptions in it for barn and greenhouse heating for farmers.
That's right, natural gas and propane.
And it's coming up for third reading. Now today it's coming up. So by the time you're at third reading, I think you're okay. Are you feeling okay that that's going to stick, or are you? I
feel much better than 48 hours ago. Okay. With the second reading, there was an amendment to actually change Bill C-234 by the Liberals. They wanted to soften the bill and not provide an exemption to farmers. And what I've argued,
the last ag minister was not a big supporter of ag in that way. I remember. That's
right. And so we do have a new ag minister, and I think that did change, and he's been hearing a lot from farmers. The problem, some farmers are paying $150,000 more to cover that carbon tax spread. at
$150,000
a year. Yeah, and so like mushroom growers, that's their bill, and they can't really pass it on to their consumers, to their customers. Yeah. So that's why, again, I think the carbon tax is policy. It's important policy, but you also have to figure out how all nodes of the supply chain are impacted by the carbon tax. And at Farmgate, it's actually somewhat discriminatory because farmers just absorb the cost, and that's it. And they don't have any alternatives. The government thinks...
You've often said they're price takers, not price makers.
They're price takers, yeah. So the government's intent here is to incentivize farmers to change their ways. But when you're in a remote location... you
got to heat that barn. You're not heating it with solar power.
So what I've always argued is that don't tax the food supply chain. Yeah. Just leave it alone, but do support companies to invest, to decarbonize the food economy as much as possible. So... and this week we heard from the Environment Commissioner. He was very critical of the carbon tax. Like he's not convinced that it's the best tool.
That was a bit. I found that report a bit of a box checking report. I mean, it's kind of something that's got to happen every year. I mean, I see a spectrum of imagination. You know, we're here in Toronto, and mass transit is expensive. Yeah. What if it was free? What if you took those subsidizing dollars and paid the city of Toronto to run the mass transit in the city free? I mean, it would be revolutionary. Some people are going to take it one way or the other, but it would, so I think,
Well, I lived in Innsbruck for 1 year.
Yeah.
Public transit was free.
Yeah.
You just hopped on. Yeah. And they were tramways just like in Toronto.
Change your behavior, no matter what your income, and change your behavior.
And we were new to the city.
Yeah.
We didn't have to bother to buy like a membership. We didn't have to, because it's all German. Just hop on. Yeah.
Let's shift gears a little bit. I don't know if you saw it in the Globe and Mail. They had a big discovery piece along with video about fishing, particularly squid fishing by the Chinese fleets.
Yes, I saw that this weekend.
And just some appalling conditions for the people who work there. We've talked about slave shrimp before issues. Yes. I wanted to get your thoughts on it. I mean, it's very hard to get it out of the supply chain. It was an interesting report because it said China now has the largest fleet in history largest fishing fleet in history. Now that, before it was the Spanish, so it's not like they're the first ones to go around the world sucking up the resources out of, but this mix of mass drawing out of fish, the mistreatment of people. How do we get this out of our supply chain? I mean, there's not a grocer in this country who'd want any of that in their supply chain, or a restaurant for that matter. But is it blockchain? How do we make sure that stuff doesn't find its way here? I mean, it's a gnarly issue, right? Because in other parts of retail, you've got, is that product made by Uyghurs? Is it slave labor coming from fashion? I mean, is any solutions that you've seen around getting that stuff out of supply chain?
I mean, I must say, first of all, I think it was a great report. The Globe and Mail tends to do some really good reporting on supply chains. They did that with some beef packing during COVID. Remember, some of the factories were shut down. They kind of did the same thing. It was domestic. This time it was global. I thought they did a really good job, but. I mean, my question to you, and I don't want to downgrade the issue, but do people actually care as consumers? After reading the article, whoever read the article, will that change their behavior? Will they ask questions?
Well, can they even change their behavior would be my point. So, when I think about, let's just think about shrimp, right? So I generally won't buy shrimp from that part of the world because I'm just worried that it could be made by slaves.
Yep.
But when I go to a restaurant and order a shrimp cocktail, I have no idea where that shrimp's coming from.
Exactly.
So it does change my behavior a little bit to the degree I can, I guess. And then you just got to have faith that the folks who are selling you the product are, trying to crack down on this stuff. I've seen blockchain. I've seen all kinds of different solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, blockchain will do so much. I think it boils down to purchasing practices, import practices, importers asking questions where they're from. But at the end of the day, especially right now, price is key. If the price is good, are they going to really ask the tough questions?
I don't eat octopus anymore. After I watched
really?
that octopus thing, I stopped eating it.
My teacher octopus?
Yeah, I stopped eating it. It's like I can't eat this thing anymore.
I got to tell you, two of my daughters were crying after.
It's too smart. I can't eat it anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I stopped.
Wow.
Yeah, I stopped. Now, pigs are smart.
That's what I had last night.
Nice.
Yikes.
Nice. Let's take a break for the news. Let's pick up on our great interview with Lisa Richardson from Canterbury Coffee.
So we're happy to welcome Lisa Richardson, CEO of Canterbury Coffee. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
And we're face-to-face at the Coffee Association conference. A great conference. You've been here before?
Never. First time.
Ah.
This is my first time.
What?
This is exciting.
Oh, wow.
You got to remember, I'm from Vancouver, so I don't get out that much.
And I'm from Halifax.
Well, there we go.
Yeah. But it's, I've spoke at this event 5 times now.
Okay.
It's a great group.
It's a great
Yeah.
group. It's really, I do know a lot of the people that are here. I've had the opportunity to come out to Toronto, over the last, 3 years with the pandemic. And so there's many familiar faces, which is wonderful. And it's super to reconnect in this environment. So
I had the pleasure to sit down and listen to your panel. It was fantastic. Great group. You made some really great comments. And one of the things that you mentioned thinking about the economy was that for the younger generations, it's tough to save. And there's this sense of despair a little bit in terms of saving and buying a house. If you can't buy a house, you say, well, why save?
I'll go out.
And people...
That's interesting. I never thought of it that way.
Oh, yeah. And you spoke about your children, and I see it in my household. I mean, it's the same thing. Absolutely. So I just want to give you a chance to kind of present yourself, who you are, your journey a little bit, how you became the CEO of Canterbury Coffee.
Well, thank you. So I originally am from Ontario, interestingly enough, but I have been in Vancouver for 40 years and spent the majority of my career with Kraft Foods, primarily in the food service business in a variety of marketing, sales, leadership roles, always in the West and out of Vancouver. So I didn't have to move anywhere, which was really quite lovely. I then did a small stint of consulting with Earthzone Happy Planet. You might be familiar with the...
I've heard of it,
the oat milk and the plant-based beverage folks. So I did that, setting up their food service strategy, in fact, for a few years. And quite frankly, I didn't think that I would go back full-time to any organization because it was a really, exciting and interesting, I could make a living doing that, which was kind of fun and a little bit different. But then somebody did come knocking on my door from Canterbury. And I thought, wow, am I going to get into coffee? That's really interesting. I did coffee at Kraft. We had Nabob, Maxwell House. At the time, we roasted Tim Hortons way back when. So, really an interesting area. I met the owner, who is the sole proprietor of Canterbury for 42 years. Very charming. And
he's based out of Vancouver?
He's out of Vancouver. Yeah. And he convinced me to come on board. And I joined in January 2020. So that was and so I thought, I came from a highly processed organization, right? I'm used to, having
packaged goods.
Packaged goods. You had very separate business units, right? And so it's been a very interesting journey over the last almost 4 years.
Yeah, almost 4 years now, I guess. 3.5. So in terms of, as CEO, what have you learned about the market? How do you see the market evolving right now in Canada? You do business in the U.S.
We do a little bit of export business, but not much.
Not
primarily
much?
Canada.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
primarily Canada.
So talk to us about how you see the market right now.
So just to give you some context about Canterbury, not that many people are familiar with Canterbury. We are one of the largest roasters in Canada. We've got our wonderful partners in, Mother Parkers and Club and Van Hoot, et cetera. But we started out in Vancouver. So we have a very large roastery. And as I mentioned in the panel, we started as a DSD business, so a distributor, direct to the operator. So we have quite a few accounts that we deal with directly, both from a roasting coffee standpoint and the non-coffee beverage standpoint. And it's a very well-developed market. 10 years ago, Murray bought our Oakville plant.
Oh, okay.
The hour being Crafts, right?
It was Crafts,
It was
right?
Crafts Oakville
it was
plant.
Crafts Oakville plant. So he bought that, and a very different market. Your strategy in the West, which had been a 42-year DSD building business, with multiple distribution centers, because we do have distribution centers in provinces, not just a head office. Very different market here, right? Because you are Many of our, peer organizations are highly focused on private label. We, too, have private label, custom label, and we lean more towards the food service arena than many of our friends. Okay. So, back, if you're interested in knowing COVID, how do you diversify? Because if you're highly skewed to the food service business, that's not a good thing. So, pivoting. I'm tired of the word pivot, right? What do you do with that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So part of what we had done from the away from home channel and shifting to a little bit more retail, that did pick up because we do have some retail business. And that was a real
I saw you had some direct-to-consumer on the site, right?
We do. And that really did balance. It didn't fully balance, but it was good for us, right? It was great. And we're in a very unique position just in terms of how we operate. Right. And, we own our facilities, which, is certainly makes a big difference.
It helps,
in our world. Obviously we had some change, in people and resources, which was very challenging. But what's different and unique about this organization is a very tenured organization. So people came, but they never left.
Isn't that a good thing?
It's very good.
Yeah.
It's very good.
How many employees do you have?
We have 135.
Okay.
Yeah.
Particularly, I'd imagine, around the actual roasting business. I mean, that's an art, I would expect, as much as it is a science.
It really is. Somebody asked me today, because Murray, he is our green buyer today. He's been doing it for 42 years. He's very good at it. And we have another gentleman who was our roastery manager for 37 years who also participates in our green buy and is a Q grader, so the sommelier of coffee.
Right.
Those combinations, somebody was asking me during the break, how do we do that and what's our strategy? And I was like, I got really good guys, right?
That's right.
Well, how do you set up for succession? Right? Because they've been doing it for a long
I'm sure
time.
you're thinking about it.
Oh, always.
Yeah.
Always trying to think forward, right? And so we do have, a small strategy internally to help out with that. But, it's been good, right? But we do see the away from home channel diminishing. And so how do you compete with the third wave, coffee shops? We are provider to multiple coffee shops.
Yeah.
We're not that brand, right? But I think, we have this tagline, routinely exceptional. We relaunched our platform.
Routinely exceptional.
Routinely exceptional. Because, what makes us better, special, different, right, in the market,
Did you bring that in when you became CEO in January 2020, or is that something that was always there?
No, we developed it during COVID.
During COVID.
We needed to refresh our website. We needed to switch it up a little bit and be a little bit more innovative. So we collaborated with the entire organization. Say, okay, you've been here for 20 years. Why? What makes us special? Is it our customer service? Is it because you can phone a customer service rep and actually get someone? Because we're not, automated. And so that was sort of the defining piece for us, is that, we're reliable. You phone somebody, we'll get it out to you, right? We've got our own trucks. We've got our own techs. Not an easy thing to do, right? But people could rely on us. And what we've seen, and I always say to my team, I said, we're either super smart or we're really behind, because the majority of larger providers that were similar to us and how they started have gotten out of what we do.
Right.
Including Kraft had done that, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
Kraft had exited.
So I came from that. I came from that world. So, we tend to be a bit Pollyanna, and you guys would know what I mean by Pollyanna. We're just really trying to be great purveyors of great coffee. We have very high standards in terms of our coffee and our roasting. Great people. We're not going to be the cheapest borscht. We're not, right? So we've got an infrastructure, obviously, but we are highly competitive. Where we over-deliver, hopefully, is on that connectivity to people. Recipe ideation, training modules.
I saw that on the site. Lots of interesting, fun recipes. You remind me of I had a conversation with the president of LVMH, which is like Louis Vuitton and all these other brands. And one of the things they're most concerned about and focused on is, when you're making bespoke bags that are really artisanal product, how do you convince people to get into that making of the bag product? So they're actually, they're funding programs to get kids out of college and get them interested in being artisans. And it just reminds me of your roasting thing. It's like, who wakes up in the morning and thinks, I want to be a coffee roaster as a career? But if you can encourage it, it's probably, I'm sure, a very rewarding and very interesting career.
Yeah.
Well, I think so. And it is interesting. There's a lot of people out there who are baristas for a living. They absolutely And we are very, very fortunate, although we're super happy for her. She's actually on mat leave right now. She just had a baby a few days ago. But she is our in-house trainer. And she's a barista trainer. So what ended up happening is that's the other piece that some of these restaurants really valued, was somebody coming in, although it might not be a third wave, cute little cafe, but they needed to know how to brew a great cup of coffee. And so we offered those services not through our sales reps only, but also through a specialized trainer.
Nice.
So she developed an online program during COVID to help them. And so how do we save them money? Well, I'm spending some money in developing these
but carving yourself out a very specific place in the market, which from your background at CPG, you would carve out and own a particular positioning. You just rolled off the stage from the CEO panel. What kind of knowledge were you dropping on the audience? What did you guys talk about?
What did we talk about? We talked a little bit about technology and how that's impacting
labor
the industry.
As well,
we talked about labor. I think I definitely circled back to labor because I think it is probably one of the larger concerns that that we all are faced with today, but doesn't get talked about a lot.
And tomorrow, likely. I mean, it's not a short-term issue.
It is not. And actually, who was talking about it was somebody on your podcast last year. Was talking about the low wage, lower education.
Benjamin Tell, I think it was Benjamin Tell.
Who have really disappeared, right? That's the missing piece. And so now this mobility shift for employment, you can be anywhere and really commanding, so much more.
Somebody said to me, I was watching a presenter, and he said, the war for talent, we always talk about it. The war's over. Talent won.
It did.
It
did.
Talent won.
So it's a hard place for manufacturing, period. Somebody in my office said, we have to have really good cleaners. This has got nothing to do with roasting.
Yeah.
And she said, well, because if we don't have really good cleaners and we pay them well, who's going to clean our place, right? We're going to shut down. So we tend to forget a little bit about that, and we shift to productivity a lot.
So talking about the talent war and beyond that, because in management, you got to really face the fact that you have to pay your talent. And what I'm seeing in food distribution in particular is more automation and robotics. Is that something you're thinking about as CEO?
I think from a capital, our capital has always been our people. And it will continue to be our people because we don't think that can be replaced by, robotics, et cetera. But absolutely looking at productivity and efficiencies. And if that comes in the form of a bit of a faster piece of equipment, or we can, move it a little bit faster with, some dynamic changes to it, we'll absolutely be looking at that ongoing, right?
Without losing the culture and the positioning you have, right? That you could, because bigger companies probably outspend you, global companies can outspend you in that. You got to figure out where you go.
Yeah. Well, there has to be a balance, right? So I think there, in the world of, banding compensation, are you midpoint, low point, high point? And how do you offset it? And what are some of the creative ways that you can do it? I was talking to somebody earlier, and I said, well, how does a remote worker define culture? Right?
Yeah.
We had a huge shift. All of our customer service people seem to be the fun young ones, which I think really contributed to, sort of an exciting office environment. Yeah. They all work from home now.
Oh, interesting.
Right? So it's a shift. They come in once a week. And
so would you say that the culture of your organization has changed, or is just shifted? Or I
think it's shifted, and I think we're putting a lot of pressure on ourselves from a head office standpoint to say, how do we make everybody happy?
Yeah.
How do we create that environment that they feel valued, right? But I think their value is a little different. They're being valued because they don't have to drive or take the bus for 2 hours a day. Yeah. And so back to the whole work-life balance, that the ever elusive, right? Yeah. I'm still searching for it, right? At my age. So we're trying to look at smaller, innovative things to do.
Last question, and then I'll pass the mic over back to Sylvain. So looking at the future, we hear and read restaurants, for example, 50% of them are on the bubble. It's always historically a fast-moving turnover business anyway, but it's a particular time because of COVID. Yeah. What are you guys doing to help? You talked about sending people to train them how to make great coffee. Is it? I saw there's a lot of sustainable fair trade product, and what's going to help win? How do you help your clients win? What are your thoughts on that and advice, really?
So, I think we need to be there for the existing portfolio of accounts that we have today. So that's not going to stop. Sadly, some of them will go out. So we need to also look at, okay, well, what are we going to do about it, right? Because, consumption going down, certainly doesn't help a roaster, right? And so we have to look at shifting a little bit for areas that we can enter into the market. So is that the U.S. market? Is that the export market? We haven't really delved into any of those things. So I think we need to do that. We need to, focus on segments of our business that we're really, really great at. And there's a couple of areas that we're just super at. The gas and convenience world. We provide coffee for a couple of very large ones, and we're really great at it. So, I think that has to shift a little bit in terms of our focus, but it won't mean getting away from our core business.
Right. So for people who don't know much about Canterbury Coffee, how do we get to know more about your company, about your products?
Yeah, I would drive people to our website, right? It's a wonderful, beautifully laid out, refreshed site that talks a lot about who we are, what we do, our product portfolio, categories. We've got a catalog on there. We've got a lot about our Give Back program and partnering with farmers, and we do a lot of work.
Very quickly, the Give Back program?
Yeah.
What is that?
We can work in many ways. So a percentage of all sales go back to a project of choice with farmers. We will also work with some of our chain accounts to work with them as we develop their blends and very specific blends. And they, for example, we have a chain in the West who is really important to give back. And they're really about community, and their focus is about children. And so a percentage of their sales, we've linked them in with our brokers and the farmers, and a percentage of their sales and ours go actually back to this particular farm. And the intention of this is to help women finance their own business and farms so that they can be working, that they can put their kids through education, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a little bit
very
about
innovative
that.
Too. Right?
It's a little bit of, it's definitely there.
We often talk about fair trade and the betterment of farmers away.
Yeah, it feels like fair trade has become almost table stakes, and you still got to find a differentiator, which sounds like what you're working on.
You do, and it's a little bit about what the strategy is for each of those individual markets that we're targeting, right? And so it's really about being collaborative and consultative with them. I mean, some people do not want to pay for a fair trade certification. RA, Rainforest Alliance, so they want conventional. So we can provide them with a great conventional product at a very reasonable price. And they can go about it different ways in terms of
your supply chain transparency approach is very specific. It seems very specific, honoring your mandate and your mission.
Everybody has a story, right? Everybody wants a story. And we just want a real story. We just want a real, open, transparent story that we live and breathe by, not pretend.
That's great. I did not know that, to be honest.
That's great.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
It's one of the things I love about this. One of the many things I love about the podcast, meeting new people and hearing about these things, right? It's fantastic. Well, Lisa, thanks so much for joining Sylvain and I on the mic here at the Coffee Association Conference with the panoramic view of Toronto
beautiful here
behind us. I wish you continued success
Thank you.
in what you're working on. Safe travels back to Van Groovy, and thanks for joining us on the pod.
I appreciate the invite. So it was great chatting with you both. Thank you so much.
Great stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We're back. Great interview, and we got lots more of those coming here from the Coffee Association of Canada's amazing conference, which sold out this year. So congratulations to them.
Yes, for the fifth year in a row, I think.
Yeah, I think they're going to need a bigger boat, need a bigger venue, I think, next year if this keeps going this way.
Just raise the price.
Well, thank you, Mr. Economics. Speaking of dining and food, I just noticed another FDA approval for another weight loss drug, this one called Zepbound, which is a competitor to Wegovy. And I was driving in on the Gardner, and there's a big billboard. I don't know if you saw it coming in from the airport. In this one of the more prominent billboards in the Toronto on the Gardner Highway that says, Ozempic, just ask for it. Yeah. And you and I first had this discussion, and then you wrote an op-ed about it. This thing's coming, man. I mean, more and more of these things are coming. People are just starting to wake up to this. In industries that, like, I had somebody say to me, we were talking about it, and they said, "Well, doesn't that mean they're going to eat more potato chips because they're going to lose weight?" I said, "No, you have no appetite. You don't understand. You don't want to eat anymore." I think this is underrated in terms of
I've spoken to, because I wanted to get to the bottom of what was going on here, how people are affected and how appetites are affected. Are you buying the same thing, but you're not getting the negative consequences, or are you just not wanting the bad stuff, I guess? And to your point, I think a lot of people are just looking at chips and they go, nope, no thanks, no need.
I think this is going to punish the fast food industry.
And you're starting to see it. I mean, I actually do think Kellogg's actually just made an announcement this week about their, it's not Kellogg's anymore. I can't remember the name.
Kellanova or something.
So you can feel that there is some movement, which is really why this coffee conference is always nice, because coffee's immune to all this stuff.
Right.
Like it's just.
Well, I think enjoying a nice cup of coffee is a treat for me anyway. I think it is for you as well. So I think that's won't be impacted as much as, I'm driving by a fast food place and I'm going to dip in for some fries and a burger and a milkshake kind of thing. I think anyway, just I wanted to mention.
But I do believe that it's something that we need to look into, and I know that I've actually spoken to Nick, formerly known as Nelson IQ, and they're looking into it as well.
Oh,
and that's a global data company, so they're seeing something also.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to end on a bit of a fun note. You mentioned Air Canada before.
Yes.
Do you remember when En Route magazine was stuffed in the back of the chair in front of you? You remember those days?
Right behind the barf bag? Yeah.
I could never touch it because, I'm a bit of a germaphobe. I'm like, I don't know. I don't even want to go near that pouch. But anyway.
Where'd you get it?
Well, it dropped in the Globe and Mail, actually. Seems from the Globe and Mail building. Okay. So it came by Globe and Mail. It is the food issue. So I wanted to give a shout out. Number one restaurant according to...
They actually asked me.
Yeah.
So I emailed them because they asked me what I thought were the best restaurants, but I did respond saying I'm not an expert.
Oh. So what I noticed, number one is Caposato, bespoke Japanese in Toronto. And out of the 10 restaurants in here, and I won't list them all, but I'll put a link to the notes. Yeah. What struck me was, at least, you kind of expect the big restaurants, Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, maybe Quebec City. But there is a bunch of restaurants in very small cities. Right, so you really see, like Matty Matheson opened up in near his home in Niagara. Right, he opened up these bespoke, great restaurants that are serving great food. I think it's this, and I've had the same experience we've talked about in Prince Edward County, where the chef's just like, I can't live here, I can't run a restaurant and make money and deliver value to my customers. So I'm going outside the major burbs. And what struck me about the 10, of course, there's a few in the big cities, but there's lots that are not. There's, from Winnipeg to small towns like this one. So Matty Matheson, he took this diner and he turned it around. Rizzo's House of Pasta in Crystal Beach, Ontario. Crystal Beach, Ontario, not typically a destination for foodies. I guess what I'm saying is,
where is it?
Well, it's near St. Catharines. Niagara region.
Oh, in that area.
Yeah, it's in the Niagara region.
Okay, wow.
I guess what I'm observing is super interesting, great to see. Great chefs are still making great restaurants, but not always in the major cities, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Encouragement to everybody to, travel and check out this. I'll put it in the link. Great. We want to support the restaurant industry as much as we can. There's some interesting people doing interesting things, and
I'm just wondering how they actually pick those restaurants, because there's you want to innovate, you want to bring something new to the table, no pun, but it'd be interesting to know how they selected those restaurants. But to promote, to your point, to promote restaurants that are kind of out there and now downtown big cities, it's great.
Yeah. So kudos to En Route Magazine, Air Canada. All right. Well, listen, that is a great episode. And like I said, we've got more great interviews coming up in future episodes of the pod recorded here live. But for now, I'm Michael LeBlanc, consumer growth consultant, podcaster, and you are?
I'm the food professor, Sylvain Charlebois.
So safe travels back home. Wonderful to be together in person with you. Always a special treat. And I'll talk to you again next week.
All right. Take care.